We are live.
Great. Good evening. This is the regular meeting of the Eureka Springs Parks and Recreation Commission. It is Tuesday, April 20th, 2021. Calling the meeting to order. Dave, would you call roll, please?
Sure. We've got Scott Barden. Here. Scott Miskell, Interim Director.
Here.
Sue Hubbard.
Here.
Ruth Hager.
Here.
Kevin Ruley.
Here.
Carmen Burden.
Here.
And Dave Hartman here.
Okay, we have quorum. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, we will open up to public comments. As a reminder, public comments are limited to 3 minutes, and it is not a question and answer session. So if you would step up to the mic, state your name and where you live.
Good evening. I'm Sharon Roberts, and I'm a resident of Eureka Springs. Congratulations on the positive coverage in the April Fun Guide and the April 14th Independent. The Independent reported that the Commission has walked 14-plus parks looking for stone walls and stone steps that need shoring up. Thank you for your work in fulfilling your mission to preserve, protect, and enhance our parks. On January 19th, I came before you to ask for the repair of the collapsed wall at Cave Spring. Tonight, I advocate once again for this needed repair. Thank you to Scott for his efforts in this regard. On March 17th, Scott presented a repair plan to the HDC and received approval to proceed. On March 30th, Scott informed me that one commissioner had directed him not to commit resources to the repair of the wall at Cave Springs. I asked the commission as a whole to consider and approve repairing the wall by excavating the collapsed wall back to the wall line and using the existing stones to rebuild the wall. This should preserve the wall line at low cost until a long-range, more comprehensive repair can be planned and carried out. Parks directors and commissioners have been promising to repair the collapsed wall for 10 years, only to shelve the project again and again, to the dismay of the residents. Please fulfill this preservation promise. While the Commission is responsible for preserving and protecting all of our unique spring reservations, the CAPC promotes these reservations to tourists and includes them on walking maps. Perhaps funding for contracting this work can be found through them. Lake Leatherwood is an important resource, however, it cannot and should not be the main focus of the Commission's resources. Recent work on shuttling, signage, vehicle parking, and improvements for bike riders show high levels of attention. Finally, I invite the Commission to join me in thanking Rami's Vintage on Van Buren for continuing their quiet volunteer work to keep Calif Spring well-tended and beautiful. In the exfiltration study of 1981, Calif Spring was the only one of the 77 springs tested that was free of bacteria. Thank you, Commissioners, for your consideration regarding this request for Cave Spring preservation, and I ask that my public comment is included in the meeting minutes.
Okay, any other public comments?
Hi, I'm Karen Mills, and my property on 29 Douglas adjoins the Cave Springs Reservation. I'm here tonight to ask the Commission to reconsider restoring the stone wall that has collapsed at Cave Springs. I would like to thank Scott for meeting with me in December to survey the condition of the wall and moving forward by preparing a plan and submitting it to the HDC on March the 17th for approval to carry out the long overdue project. Of course, the HDC was happy to approve that request. The Douglas Street, Steel Street Loop is part of the allure of Eureka Springs. With numerous pocket parks and springs, tourists carrying their maps discover other features of the area, including Bon Repos, Little Lake Eureka, the Carey Nation House, and abundant flora and wildlife. The area has been featured as part of the popular Historic Museum Christmas tour several times. I respectfully request that the Commission reconsider and approve the small restoration project as an act of good faith. Cave Springs, its wall, and the loop as a whole are integral parts of Eureka Springs' place in history, the town that water built. Please include my comments with the minutes of tonight's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Scott Price, and I live at 5 Ming Street in the Little Lake Eureka area. I just wanted to comment and give my support behind Karen Mills' effort to have the wall rebuilt. I moved here back in October, and previously I lived here in Eureka Springs back in 1958. I actually grew up here, went to school, and in the area. I just want to comment on the beauty that you have here in Eureka Springs. And to piggyback on what Karen said, I meet constantly tourists. In fact, this last week, a family from Nebraska was at Little Lake Eureka, and they had done the walk. And there was a young couple that had the paper for doing the walk of the loop. That street and the wall and the park that the city owns there is an invaluable resource for attracting tourists here in this town. And it's sad to see the neglect with the wall in disrepair when it could be restored and show the natural beauty that Eureka Springs is. Thank you for my consideration and support of Karen Mills. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Sue Hopkins, and I live on 6790 Highway 23 North, Eureka Springs. I also have a home on Council Street, which is just around the corner from Cave Springs. And my children were raised in that house, and they played in all the parks up there on the loop by Little Lake Eureka, and Cave Springs was one of those parks. And I still walk in town at least once a week. My husband walks daily, and he walks by Cave Springs every day. I walk by it once a week and have noticed for a number of years now how it looks kind of like a big compost pile where the rock wall used to be, and it's not as beautiful as it used to be. And I'm just here also to beg that you kind of reprioritize, reevaluate fixing that spring. We're lucky that Karen has been such a watchdog, because I think in another 10 years, if it's not fixed, people won't even remember, and nothing will happen. So I implore you to try to dig deep find some funds for that. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Ms. Fisher, I'm here tonight to inform the Commission of a project that I'm working on, an effort to continue developing the Eureka Springs Linear Arboretum, which was initiated during the 2018 Arkansas Forestry Commission grant that I coordinated with the Eureka Springs Tree City USA Committee and administered by Glenna Booth. The current project is funded by the Walton Family Personal Philanthropy Green Space and is administered by the local nonprofit, the Community Development Partnership. Patty Irwin, the former Arkansas Urban Forestry Coordinator, helpful with so many past Tree City grants, was instrumental in helping facilitate the mitigation project with the Walton Family Foundation to create improvements to the downhill gravity trails impacts in Lake Leatherwood City Park and with the forestry grant. These efforts also fueled the 22 local tree walks that I led with walkers in the parks and around town to engage community members with our urban forest and to help folks learn to identify tree species and observe the variety of resources in our wonderful landscape. A 3-mile circular route was plotted by identifying trees along Spring Street, beginning at Basin Park, following the Upper Historic Loop, and returning via Benton Street. Part of this inventory was drafted into a map by former Parks Commissioner Christian Super. This project, working again with Ms. Irwin, will once again use tree plotter software to record the geographic position, names, diameters, and condition of trees viewable along rights-of-way and in public green spaces to indicate significant trees growing within the city limits. This data is then intended to be integrated into a useful mapping system for public information and to help create programming for locals and visitors to recognize the role these significant trees play in the health and well-being of our environment and lifestyles. From initial conversations with park staff to create beneficial aspects from this project, I'll begin focusing on 2 trail facilities, Spring Garden Trail in town and the Fuller Trail along Lake Leatherwood. As Parks advances programming and information delivery to its various facilities, this project is intended in part to help as a tool for parks to plan and develop tree-friendly experiences throughout its green spaces. I will schedule and publicize walks to demonstrate the process and to renew the interest in spending time in small groups outdoors over several seasons this year. I would suggest that commissioners might feel free to contact me via my email or phone number provided in copies of this statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Any other public comments? Okay, chairman's comments. So what I was planning on talking about tonight has everything to do with infrastructure and some of the decisions that have been made and will be made. I am the one that asked Scott not to spend any money on that wall yet, and for 2 reasons. We have identified 3 significant infrastructure projects, largely due to deferred maintenance over the years, but well in excess of any funds that this commission has to spend over the next year or 2 that we really need to address. We've had to close the pedestrian access to the top of the dam because the railing is so badly deteriorated and damaged that it's now unsafe. That is likely going to be close to a $500,000 project. Basin Park has significant issues with it, with the settlement of the plaza, the settlement of the fountain, and retaining walls that are failing. Magnetic Spring Park is likely going to have to be comprehensively rebuilt because it has not been maintained well over the years and is showing extreme amounts of deterioration. So it's not a matter of not wanting to do something, it's a matter of prioritizing things. And we're in the process of doing that, trying to determine what the cost and the scope is of some of these things that have to be done, and then setting priorities based on that. There is no intentional neglect of anything, but we have limitations of what we're able to do. So I hope everyone will bear with us as we work through these issues and identify them. Scott has been working ever since we discovered the dam to find sources of grants that will help us pay for some of these things so that we can accelerate them. But if it has to be done out of just the revenue that we get, it's going to be years before it's all addressed. And that will be unfortunate. So it's not that we're not doing anything. We are. We're very well aware of it. The biggest issue with the cave spring wall is it cannot be repaired. It was never a properly constructed stone wall. It was not constructed in a manner that any of the historic stone walls are. And if it's built back the way it is, it will fail again because it's not in any way a structural wall. So the only way to deal with that is to tear the entire thing down and build a proper stone wall, which is a significant investment and has to be considered with all the other ones that we have to do. Now, as far as the park, I will say that there has been very little money spent on what's been done. What they have addressed are issues that were directly affecting the vast majority of parks users. When the shuttles were started, there was never really a plan to operationalize them, and it was very disruptive. The work that we've done is simply take the resources that were already purchased and money that had already been spent and organize them in such a way that it would have the least impact on the greatest number of parks users. And that's the objective of that, and they've been quite successful at it. It has been working very smoothly. The conflicts that existed almost continuously last year have been eliminated, and it's a better experience for everybody in the park. So I'll turn it over to Scott for the director's comments.
Well, we've accomplished a lot in this past month. The first quarter financial statements are done and hopefully will be approved this evening. We've expanded the parking out at Black Bass Lake, added a porta potty, a dog waste station. There'll be additional work going on out there, such as new roof on the kiosk. Also, plants have been ready to go out into the gardens for the last week or so, but seeing that this cold weather was approaching, we decided to wait until either later this week or early next week to do that. I think we're all aware that the budget for the in-town gardens has been dramatically increased from previous years, and so we should see some real changes. Also, it's already been mentioned that there's some major repairs that need to be done to a couple of the parks, hardscape type repairs that are going to be very costly, but they are in the works. We're getting bids for those sorts of things, engineering, etc. I'd also like to mention that we'll be talking tonight about the possibility of cutting down a few of the trees that are in Basin Park, and I would just like to say that cutting down trees is not something that we like to do. It's something that there are a couple of trees that are either dead and dying or otherwise harming the stone walls especially. One of the possibilities on that is Chris Fisher was here this evening. We've talked with him about possibly consulting with us on exactly which ones are the best to remove. But one thing that I want to emphasize is that if we cut down a large tree because it's either old and likely to fall in an uncontrolled manner, or it's damaging the walls, etc., we will replace them with appropriate trees. In fact, that's one of the things that Chris and I have talked about is probably more, smaller trees, but native trees. And so I look forward to working with Chris and others that would have comments on that sort of thing. But the point is that we won't just cut a tree down and leave it bare. We will replace any tree that we cut down with one or more appropriate trees. And oftentimes, by the way, it may have to be in a different location, so you may not see a tree going in that same spot. But I wanted people to be aware that this sort of thing is going to be coming up, but it will be well thought out, well planned, and only dealing with trees that are either dangerous or are harming our other resources. I'd also like to mention that for Arbor Day, there will be a tree planting ceremony. That's going to be April 30th at 11 a.m. That'll be at Magnetic Spring. The mayor will be there to plant the tree. It'll be a red bud. It's a spot that we were wanting to put one anyway, so it was a convenient time to do that. And the rest of the things are all things that we'll be covering for the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Committee reports. Anything on the Trails Committee?
I have something to read. The Trails Committee met on March 31st with David Rinko presenting several needs of the park, including the possible dredging of Lake Leatherwood in order to provide a crossable channel for a future crossable bridge. The length of time needed to repair the dam was discussed with the consideration that the top of the dam may not be crossable by the public for some time. Linda Moore was present from the public to discuss the need for some hiking-only trails. Mr. Renko acknowledged this need and discussed the possibility of making Fuller and the fishing trail pedestrian-only at some point in the future. Linda also pointed out the need to remove invasive species along the trail, especially in black bass, and volunteered to champion a volunteer group to service this need. No new trails are being planned in the immediate future as staff is concentrating on repairs and maintenance with particular attention given to those items in the trails assessment. The next meeting will be April 28th at 6 p.m. at Main Stage. Members of the public are encouraged to attend. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. Finance Committee, Scott?
Yes, sir. We had a Finance Committee meeting and reviewed the first quarter 2021 financials. And one of the things that we seemed to spend time on was discussing Reserve America and how they collect the money from the customer and return it to Parks and Recs. And one of the things that we noticed was the reconciliation process was they would send us an electronic statement with a cutoff of, let's say, the 30th of the month, but they were continuing to issue refunds, but they weren't accounting for that from the 30th to the time they sent the electronic report to us. So we were always off a little bit. So Nikki's working with that company so that they understand when they send the end of the month report that we use to calculate refunds and revenue, that they cut off and don't add to that report. So that's going to help Nikki with reconciliation between what goes in the bank and what's refunded to customers that cancel due to weather or something like that. One of the things also is it seems like it'd be easier for us to use let's say a sales account, we'll call it revenue for the cabins as we have now, but have a kind of like a sales returns and allowance, we call it refund allowances, versus putting it under cost of goods sold on the back, because you have two different places in the financial report that they need to be together so you can see what we actually collected and refunded at that point. So that's what I would like to recommend changed in that area so that we don't run the risk of recognizing revenue twice. So that's really a big improvement for us.
I'll add that, those are anomalies, and I think they're in part anomalies because of historically the way we had accounted for it,
Right.
which it took us a while to dig through it, and I think the reason why we noticed it this time around and hadn't in the past is because the deposit returns through Reserve America were so high because of the really bad weather that we had in January.
That's right.
And so we have these two weird lines of the refund and rebate under the income line, which just didn't make logical sense to me. And then the same refund and rebate line under cost of goods sold, which are what Scott was saying. One is when they give us the deposit revenue as soon as they collect it, and then within the same statement, they will charge us for returns or rebates that they've had to make to customers who canceled. So it's not, we feel confident it's not misrepresenting anything in the financials. It looks funny because of what it's being called and where it's showing up, which is what we're going to work on and try to figure out how to do it in a way that's a little clearer to show that it's just clearly money that's going in and out for two different reasons. But other than that, we think the financials are in very good shape, and as the Finance Committee, we're recommending that the Commission approve them tonight. Okay, any other committees? Search Committee, do you guys have anything to report?
Not very much. So we'll be going live with the ad this week, so we'll probably start to see resumes trickling in, but we're planning to just accumulate them until the deadline and then review them. So there won't be too much to report until May, but
Okay.
it is ongoing.
Super. Old business, none. So we can get on to new business. Item 1, approval of Q1 2021 financial statements. Can I get a motion to approve?
I move to approve the 2021 first quarter financials.
Second?
I'll second.
Discussion? Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Unanimous?
And then everybody's in?
Okay. I'm sure that the mayor will be pleased to have our first quarter financials within 3 weeks of the first quarter ending. Item number 2, approval of fee schedule. These are the parks fees that we discussed in the last workshop. Scott has gone through them and removed the ones that we weren't comfortable with moving forward with and included the ones that we had discussed with a slight increase in the camping rates and boat rentals, I believe, are the ones that increased, right, Scott?
Yes, roughly a 10% increase in the cabin rentals and the camping.
Which is in line with what we discussed in the last workshop. So, we can get a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Second?
Discussion, questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, item number 3, approval of proposal for geotechnical services in Basin Park. Scott, do you want to just kind of briefly go over what we're doing here?
Yes. As everyone, I'm sure, who's been in Basin Park anytime recently has noticed, the wall underneath the fountain is sinking. It's not level, and we have gotten a grant to do the stonework for that, but there's an underlying problem that has caused that, and that is that there's been some collapse of the tunnels that are underneath there. And so we need to do some engineering to do a proper foundation for the stonework. And one of the things that the engineer first needs before he can do his job in designing a proper foundation would be to do some core samples. So we've been provided with an agreement from a geotech company that can do that. And what we're talking about is they do a core, they drill down so they can tell what sort of soil and or rock is there, and then therefore know better how to deal with a foundation that will be permanent. And so this is something that is the first step towards designing the foundation that will enable us to fix that. And accordingly, it's something that I believe we really need to do. We can't do the repairs until we get this done and know what we're dealing with underneath the ground. I would also point out that the contract is for $2,450, and there are a couple of other items that are like by the day or by the hour, so it could end up being slightly more than that, possibly in the $3,000 range. Those are items that they don't know the exact amount until they get there, but they have, of course, quoted what the price will be, whether it's per foot or per hour or what have you. So this is something that will help us to get on track to getting Basin Park back to where it needs to be. And I will add that some of the other things that we'd like to do as far as planting the trees, fixing the beds, so we can do a better job with flowers and whatnot. that all can't be done until we do this, because a lot of those areas that we would be doing that work would be torn up if we did those repairs and then subsequently came back and tried to do the foundation work. So this is really a tail that's wagging the dog on getting Basin Park back to what it really needs to be.
And just to add a few things to it, Basin Park, when the park was originally created, it was at street level. The end of the 1800s, they decided to raise the plaza level to the height of the wall that existed along the road. And so all of that is fill that the plaza is sitting on. When they did that, they built a limestone tunnel, as they apparently did at every spring, to control the seasonal flow that runs underneath the park and actually directly underneath the fountain. There was a study done 10 years ago by an engineer that showed that that tunnel was beginning to collapse. So by collapsing, it's allowing water to escape the tunnel and go into the fill, which erodes the fill, which is one of the reasons why the surface of the plaza is sitting at different levels. So as well as being able to determine what we need to do to correct the fountain issues, this is to decide what we need to do for the plaza itself, because the plaza will continue to settle at different rates if there is water seeping into that fill underneath it. So the borings are going to tell us not only the type of soil and the density of the soil, it's going to tell us whether there's water in there, whether there's any voids in there, and it could well turn into a project where the entire plaza has to be removed, that tunnel replaced with an adequate drain line, and then bring new fill in and recompact it so that everything will stay. And unfortunately, some of the other things that we had planned to do, the repairs of the walls, are going to have to wait until we do that so that we understand what the foundation is under the walls and whether any of this work will undermine that. So he's right, this is kind of the tail wagging the dog. It's the first step of what's going to be a fairly long process to determine what the work will be that needs to be done in the park and the extent of that work. So, can I get a motion to approve the geotechnical agreement?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Oh, I'm sorry,
Can we
discussion.
Discussion first.
Yes, I'm sorry.
So the first is, why did we pick these particular people? Are there other options? Were they recommended to us?
Yes, they were recommended by the engineer that we've been talking with about both Basin Park and the dam work and probably some other things that we've talked about. And so it was based on his recommendation. I would also say that obviously Kevin Ruley, as an architect, has background in these sorts of contracts. I myself, both when I was in construction and then as an attorney, would have these sorts of things done for, especially if there was litigation, why did a slab crack or what have you. And so the relatively low dollar amount is consistent with what my experience has been, and I presume Kevin's as well.
Yeah.
So
There was no need to second-guess the engineer and the professionals that he wanted to use.
Okay. And there's obviously some daily rates. Do we know how many days this work is likely to take? Because that will affect the cost.
It's
It's 12 days in the contract, wasn't it?
12 days after they receive the contract, they can start the work.
Yeah.
No,
it
with it-
started-
yeah,
this-
it's-
This work should not take
The expectation
more than
is that it's a
day.
single day.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
we'll need some prep work to get things out of the way, because it's going to require bringing a drill rig in and driving it onto the plaza in order
Right.
to do it. The base, and that's what the numbers are, so the base contract, the 2,000, whatever it was, is for the work that the engineer requested, which is, I think it was 5 borings. The optional items are basically per diem amounts based on what we see in those 5 borings. If there's something that makes the engineer uncomfortable, he may ask for an additional boring or 2, and that's what the per diem amounts are are there to cover. So the five that they will do are covered within that 24.5 that is the base amount.
Okay. And then this contract says that there's 5 borings and we're going to pick the locations. Is it actually the engineer that's providing
The engineer
that
picks the locations, yes. And we have, in fact, he provided to us that he got from the mayor's office the documents that were created back during the engineer's examination 10 years ago that show the location of those two tunnels that go underneath the fountain. There's one that goes underneath the fountain to Spring Street, and there's one that goes out and goes all the way down to North Main Street. And they kind of split off under the Doughboy, or I guess at the manhole cover is where they kind of part ways. So he knows the approximate locations of those. He will probably be taking borings in those locations, at least a few, and that will determine how much water has been seeping out. And then we had discussed taking borings in other places just to understand what the composition of that fill is that the plaza is sitting on.
Okay, thanks. Okay,
All right.
that's my questions.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. And then the last item, approval of proposed tree removals. I don't know that we're ready to put an item up for a vote. You wanted to discuss kind of the scope of what we need to do broadly.
Yes, the way this started, actually there were a few trees that were of concern. There's one in Harmon Park. It's an old pine tree that it's so dead that it has no bark on it any longer. And it's when you're dealing with a rotten tree, as this one is, it's difficult to safely just cut down with a chainsaw. So we wanted professionals to do that rather than our own staff. There's also a very large tree in Basin Park. In fact, unfortunately, it's, I think, the largest black gum tree way up at the top, and it is dead, and it's in such a situation that if and when it does fall, not if, when it falls, if we don't do it in a controlled fashion, it's likely to fall right on the bandshell. So that's one that we need to do. I also, while we were doing this, in fact, while I was dealing with getting estimates, we got a call from somebody who has a home on Spring Street up near between Sweet Spring and Harding Spring. I don't recall the exact address, but the tree is on our property, but it leans out over their property, and it's also dead. In fact, not only over their property, over their home. And so these are all trees that really are high priority. We've had some further discussions, though, and these are ones that I think we should move on as quickly as possible. I should also add that I threw in there to have them give us a price to grind out the old tree stumps from the trees that have been removed in the flower beds, so that we can add some dirt, some better soil, plant some new trees, etc. As I said a few moments ago, we have to get this foundation issue dealt with before we can do that. But the grinding out of the stumps would be included in this. Now, as we've been looking at our infrastructure and some of the problems that we have with walls, etc., a lot of them are in the condition they're in because of large trees that were growing adjacent to stone walls, and as the roots grow and push out, they cause the walls to move and ultimately to fail. And we have a number of trees that are causing those sorts of problems. We also have some other trees, even right there in Basin Park, that are large trees that sooner or later will, and a lot of them are leaning in ways that give us some concern. And so In addition to this, what we hope to do is come up with a more comprehensive assessment and plan for how we're going to deal with the trees that are in that sort of a situation. As I mentioned earlier, Chris Fisher has indicated that he would be available for that sort of project. I think he and I and perhaps others of you might want to do a go take a look at some of the areas that we're talking about. But what we would like to do is have a comprehensive plan in place to determine which trees are really problematic and are either going to harm property or our stone walls, etc. Determine which ones need to be removed, and then also determine what trees we want to use to replace them. We even talked about doing sort of a zoning sort of a scheme where we show on a site plan areas that we don't want really large trees. In other words, we would do the dogwoods, the red buds, the other trees that tend to not get really big to where we have to be concerned later about them doing a lot of damage when they die. And then the other areas, the other zones, if you will, we don't care if it's a big oak tree. We love them. We just don't want them in a spot that's going to do us some harm. So what I'd like to have considered is to either approve this current bid. There were 2 bids, and by the way, I did walk the areas with 3 different tree companies, and only 2 provided bids. Took about 6 to 8 weeks to even get these 2. People are very busy right now. At any rate, I think it is important that the Commission consider taking care of these that we know have to come down, and then we can come up with a formal proposal, hopefully at the next meeting, where we take a look at hiring somebody to do the type of assessment that we've talked about. I did speak with, in the department head meeting this morning, I spoke with Bobby Ray, who's the one that approves or disapproves of tree cuts, and he indicated that for the type of thing that we're talking about, some sort of a comprehensive plan like that, especially by somebody who's got credentials, would go a long way towards enabling a quick approval of that type of thing. Of course, that's not before the Commission tonight. I'm just letting you know why some of the other trees that we looked at, for instance, last week when we were at our outdoor workshop, those aren't on here just because this is a new dialogue about trying to be a little more proactive and prevent this sort of thing. I'll summarize by saying the big black gum tree that's going to cost $3,500 just for the crane, had we dealt with that tree when it was small, we wouldn't have had to have spent that sort of money. So it's just some proactive thinking, some planning to try to make sure trees are in the best places. The best tree is in the best spot, so we don't have to deal with this sort of thing in the future. So what I respectfully request is that you consider approving the cutting of the trees that we know need to be done immediately, and then at our next, in fact, probably the workshop, I'll have a proposal for the type of assessment that I've mentioned.
So I would be okay with moving ahead with Spring Street and Harmon Park. The problem I've got with Basin Park is that 2 of the other trees that we're talking about will also require a crane. So there's no point in moving forward with this one until we have a number on the total, and that should give us some leverage to get a better price for the 3 of them, because they'd only be bringing a crane in once.
And what I could do is, obviously we're looking at 2 bids, and one is definitely a better price than the first one. I'll talk with that contractor and get a price on those other 2. And I would report back at our next workshop, and then we could presumably have a revised bid then on the next regular.
If we need to, as part of the workshop, either before the workshop or after the workshop, we can schedule a special meeting just to address that one item,
Very
so
well.
that we don't have to wait a month. So if you want to, we can go ahead and just carve that out and approve the last two items on this bid to move forward with and get those taken care of, which is the dead pine in Harmon Park and the one on Spring Street. And then we'll address the trees that have to be removed with a crane at the next meeting.
It might be best that then that the commission take no action this evening. Of course, that's your prerogative, but the price may vary depending on whether he has to mobilize twice or not. So I'll call him tomorrow, and hopefully we can get him out to take a look at the other trees at Harmon, at Basin.
Yeah, then let's just plan on trying to get something together in the next 2 weeks, and we'll just go ahead and schedule a special meeting with
Very
one
well.
agenda item for immediately following the workshop.
I'll do
Okay?
that.
All right. So that concludes new business. Do we have, commissioners' comments? Dave, do you have anything?
No, I don't have anything tonight.
I don't either.
Bruce?
Oh, other than thank you all, the public comments tonight. It's nice to see people that are involved. I received emails from people, we all did, about their support of the project, but also they mentioned their support of parks in general, which was nice. Thank you. Appreciate that. And also, I wanted to comment on the workshop we had, the outdoor workshop we had in the park. It was very helpful. I'm glad we did that. We got to see the trees in person that we're talking about and decide, we can see that, yes, they could fall. It was nice to have that in person. I like that. Thank you.
And one of the commissioners did go over to Magnetic with me and take a look at, I think we all know what the problems are, but as far as if any of you would like to go, and I could show you the issues we're dealing with and how we're thinking of repairing that, I'm more than happy to do that. Obviously, one at a time, otherwise we have to give notice. So.
Thank you.
Sue?
So I consider part of my duty as a commissioner is to represent hikers. And the hikers have obviously just lost crossing the dam and some trails, but it couldn't be helped, but it still happened. I know a lot of people locally don't really go into the Miners Rock area, but I still do go up there. But that's gotten a lot harder because you've taken away my parking right next to the shuttle area. And I also hike at Passion Play, which isn't park property, but I really like parking at Magnetic Spring and hiking up there, and that's going to get taken away. So I know we have a lot of influx of bikes, and it's going to take some operational changes and some adjustments. But I just want to make sure that hikers do get considered and that we lose as little as possible out of this process.
Right. I think, the changes at Magnetic are because that is one of the most popular springs for people to visit.
Yeah.
And, it's not a switch you can turn on and off and say, okay, mountain bikers can't park here.
Yeah. I'm not questioning any of the decisions that are made. I just want to make sure that hikers do get. The focus is on bicycles so much right now. I just want to make sure hikers don't get forgotten and get considered in these changes.
No, that's one of the reasons why, we in the earliest conversations with Dave Ranco, we looked at actually making some trails, especially primarily the fishing and the Fuller Trail hiker only, so that there are no conflicts. I also tasked David with figuring out how to restore the Miners Rock Trail so that it's not, ever since the downhill trails were built, there's too much potential conflict between mountain bikers and hikers on Miners Rock Trail, and that needs to be repaired. And he's got some good ideas as to how that can be done. And so the parking issue there, again, was dominated by mountain bikers, and it was part of what was creating a bad experience for everybody else in the park, because when that parking lot was created, it wasn't well thought through. A pickup truck parking there, its tailgate was basically edge of the road, so when they were unloading in the middle of the road, and it affected every other park user that came into the park. So it's not the solution we want, long-term, but it's the solution that creates a lot of the customer experience issues that we were having right there. Ultimately, once we can find a safe way for everybody to cross the creek, all of the shuttle operations will take place in the area of the ball fields parking and get it off the road entirely. So then that will be able to open back up for hikers to use. But like I said, on weekends, hikers couldn't use it anyway because it was packed full of mountain bikers'
Yeah,
vehicles. So.
I mean, I would always just go beginning or middle of the week.
Right.
It wasn't an issue then. Yeah.
Mr. Barden?
No, I have no more comments. Well, I have one. I'll say that I'm really impressed with our shuttle operations for the first quarter, and we have a plan, and it's working, and it's probably not perfect, but it is a good plan, and we're making money, not losing money finally. That's the main thing. So.
Okay. Approval of minutes from last regular meeting. Do we have copies of those minutes?
I didn't get a copy.
Did I never send them? I have them. I guess I just never sent them.
Was that the 316 meeting? I have it on my,
Yes, so maybe.
have it on my phone.
Okay. We can bring that up at the next meeting.
Okay.
We'll get copies of it,
Okay.
get them to everybody, and then we'll approve that at the next meeting. Okay. Unless anybody has anything else, we can adjourn. Do I have a motion?
I move we adjourn.
I'll
Second?
second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.